Welcome to Shielded, the podcast dedicated to helping Florida's first responders understand the laws that affect their work and their lives. We bring clear answers, practical tips, and stories to help you when you need it most. If you're a first responder in Florida, this is your playbook. Be sure to check out all of our resources at bicklerlaw.com. I'm your host, Paolo Longo, and I'm here with my partner, Jeff Bickler. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. Now let's get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Shielded, the First Responder Lawcast. I'm Paolo Longo, and this is part 2 of our multi-part series on PTSD and the laws that shape the lives of Florida's first responders. Last time, we looked at how the law technically covered PTSD, mental nervous injuries, but really didn't include any wage loss protection, essentially leaving first responders to kind of suffer in silence. Today, we're going to tell the story of the case that forced change, and that was our client, Officer Gerry Realin. He was an Orlando police officer who experienced firsthand the tragic shooting at the Pulse nightclub, which ultimately led to changing the law in Florida. Joining me again is my partner and mentor, Jeff Bickler, the man who helped lead that reform. Welcome, Jeff. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Paolo. Good to be here, as always.
So, this day is kind of, important for me for many reasons. Obviously because that was the Pulse shooting, but June 12th is my wife's birthday. And so, every year on my wife's birthday, we kind of take a minute and remember, that shooting right here in our hometown, in our backyard, 49 victims, just unbelievable.
Right.
And so, us being first responder lawyers, being, 10 minutes away from Pulse, all the law enforcement officers that were involved, all the firefighters that were involved, all the first responders that were there in that particular situation, we started getting calls pretty quick. But one that stands out, obviously, is Gerry's case, right? So, what do you remember about talking to Gerry?
Well, maybe again provide a little bit of context and how how I was looking at this problem, and we had been considering for a long time that the issue of lost wages for mental nervous injury claims and post-traumatic stress not being covered by the law. We knew it was a big problem, and on the night of the Pulse shooting, and this is kind of interesting history, the firefighters were having their state convention in Jacksonville.
Right. We were there.
Right. And I don't know if you recall, we had just won the Westfall case in the Florida Supreme Court on the lost wage issue and the constitutionality of the limitations on temporary disability. So we had Mr. Westfall with us in Jacksonville. We were all celebrating this really massive win in the workers' compensation system for one of our firefighter clients. And we were doing our normal classes at the same time. So usually at the firefighter convention, back in those days, we would do 2 classes. We'd do, one on a Sunday or Saturday morning and then another one on a Sunday morning. And that was usually near the end of the conference. So that particular year, we had done our Saturday class. We had Mr. Westfall, going around and meeting with people and talking about that case, which was, such a seminal and such an important constitutional decision. And then Saturday night we went out, we did our thing. We had our dinner, and then we had our hospitality suite, which we were sponsoring at the time. Got up the next morning to do the class, and when I got up, there on the news, of course, the Pulse shooting. So
right.
That was like, okay, all the Orlando guys had left, all the Orange County firefighters had left, everybody was back. The guys who were still in Jacksonville and that came into the class, we just decided to do an impromptu discussion of Pulse and also the fact that, look, there are going to be post-traumatic stress cases that will roll out of this that will not have coverage. And,
Right.
and, and I actually suggested to that group, I said, I guarantee you that within a few weeks, we're going to have a case, at least one, where somebody's going to come forward and they're going to be out of work because they witnessed this horror, and there's not going to be a workers' comp claim. And every single guy in that and woman in that class, Paolo, could not believe what I was telling. They didn't even understand that wouldn't be covered, But sure enough, we went back to Orlando after the convention. And then within a couple of weeks, we got a call, and it was a call from Jessica Realin, who had been looking around for a lawyer and nobody would take her case. I think she said she had called the Morgan firm. She had, called all the usual suspects to see if she could find somebody to take on her case, and nobody would do it. So she came into our office. She brought her husband, Gerry, who you referenced early. And he was in such a state that he really couldn't even talk to us.
Yeah, he didn't want to. He just kind of sat there and just let her do all the talking.
Yeah, and it's a strange thing. I'd been thinking about this, and obviously, just recently did a white paper on some of the problems with the current statute. I was going back through some of my research, and I found one of my journal notes, and it was a journal note from the day that I met with Jessica Realin. And, I told her at that time and in that meeting, and it's all reflected in that journal note, which is kind of fascinating, that, your case is not going to be winnable. I can't get you lost wages, but we can use this case to change the law. That was exactly what I told her, right? And she said, well, the law needs to be changed. And, to her credit, she became a really fierce advocate for this and for her husband. And so we started really the journey at that time. And we took that case, we filed a petition for benefits seeking lost wages. I mean, it was your case. I mean, you actually handled the case.
Yeah, I was in the trenches doing the litigating.
Yeah,
I remember.
You got to be the guy. You got to be the guinea pig to go and take a hopeless, unwinnable case to the judge of compensation claims. But we knew that was going to ultimately be the outcome, because the statute at the time did not provide for lost wages.
Right. I mean, we had to do it. Do it. I mean, like you said, we knew we were going to lose that case. Right. But how else are you going to force legislative change, right? How else are you going to bring this to the attention of the powers that be and the people that need to know where this law fails, right? Is that we have to go try these cases, and sometimes you just got to go run into the buzzsaw, right?
100%.
And kudos to Gerry and his wife for sticking around and letting us do that, right? I mean, it was not an easy thing for them to do. I mean, and just to give a little context, like you said, I mean, they accepted the medical portion of that claim, right?
Right.
And once we'd filed the claim, they provided a doctor, they gave him treatment, right?
They provided the medical care, which was all the statute provided, right? As we talked about in the last podcast. I mean, that was all you could get, and this was the greatest example of that. And
because of what I mean, him being so many hours inside that crime scene, right, had put him in a place where he wasn't going back to work.
No,
right. I mean,
he was nearly catatonic by the time he came out of there, and I mean, even certainly by the time that we met with him, Paolo.
Yeah,
he had these symptoms of just complete disassociation. I mean, you could not reach the guy. It was just tragic.
Right. And so, at a minimum, he was getting medical care, right? But his doctors from jump were like, you're not going back to work. Right. And that was the whole impetus of the claim, right? That was the whole real issue of the litigation was, this guy is being told he cannot work because of a condition that he suffered on the job directly related to his employment. And if he had any other kind of injury and his doctor told him, you can't work, then he'd be getting paid. But because
Right.
this guy is job is to protect and serve the public as a first responder, suffers a traumatic injury, not to his body, but to his psyche, that puts him in a position where he is literally physically unable to work because of the job and he can't get paid. That's a big problem, right? So that was the issue that we had to go and litigate
Right.
in the court, knowing full well that we were going to lose the case.
Yeah.
So obviously that's what happens.
Well, that was, that was part of the grand scheme of, getting involved, right? I mean, we knew, and I again projected or predicted rather in Jacksonville that we'd have a case like that that would allow for us to test the law. And sometimes you've got to do that. I mean, you got to take the case and you've got to try it on its merits and make the legal arguments and make the court decide against you. And we like to use the phrase, die on that hill, right? I mean, there are some hills worth dying on, and that's one of them because if you simply said that he's not covered, and if Gerry didn't want to litigate that case and pursue it all the way through trial, then you would not have that order from the court that explained how the law worked and how it didn't cover him. And that was the impetus, really, or one of the ways that we were able to get traction with the legislature.
Yeah, because we really did get a good court order, even though we lost the case.
Right. It was 27 pages, very thoughtful, very thoughtful analysis.
Right. And the order did do a very good job of highlighting, the holes in the statute and the failings in the law, and then the problems that, specifically first responders were facing. And Gerry, he was not the only one, right? There were a lot of other claims filed at the same time. And there were a lot of other first responders that were there specifically at Pulse that were going through the same thing. Right. And so kudos to Gerry for sort of, letting himself be the guinea pig and putting himself out there. But with that order, I mean, the stars seem to be lining up at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we started the process. I went with Jessica to meet with a local state senator. We got him to be a sponsor on the first draft of the legislation. Robert Asensio also, I think, was the sponsor on the House side for us. He was a first responder, had also been a client of ours, but he ran for House of Representatives and was successful in that endeavor. And then, so I think he was the sponsor on the House side in the first year. And that was in 2017. So, just kind of moving through the process, we had the initial bill was filed in 2017. And I think we maybe got one committee stop on the House side. I don't even think we got the bill heard on the Senate side.
That's pretty typical, right? I mean, legislation doesn't just happen, right? I mean, this is, the making of the sausage of this takes a long time.
It's absolutely brutal. And, when you got somebody like Jessica Realin in tow, and she, is such a fierce advocate and wanting to see this done and not really understanding the kinds of delays that we're running up against and some of the opposition to the proposed legislation and the fact that you can't get traction and what's going on, it can be very frustrating. But again,
and speaking of opposition, I mean, who is opposed to passing laws to protect first responders?
Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
I've been doing this long enough. I'm not surprised, but probably a lot of our listeners would be surprised.
Well, you get like the League of Cities comes out and they throw some crazy number out there about what this is going to cost, the taxpayers, and it's an unfunded mandate, and it's this and it's that, and
all the frauds that are going to come out of the woodwork, right?
This is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars without any analysis or backup at all for the number that they're projecting, right? And so, but it's the League of Cities talking, and who are we? We're Jeff Bickler with Jessica Realin over here, and candidly, I don't even ever lobby these claims because, I recognize I don't really have a voice in the issue. It's our clients that should have the voice, right? I can try to help educate them, but that was Jessica Realin pushing that bill. And then what ended up happening, Paolo, and we can kind of fast forward a little bit. Um, we started seeing it wasn't just Pulse cases, you know, because there was publicity surrounding the negative trial decision that we got. There was publicity surrounding the fact that there was no lost wage coverage. It was all over the local media.
Right.
So,
And then the unions start picking up on it, and then it starts spreading
right.
from union to union, from police to fire, back and forth. And they're like, hey, well, what happens when this happens to one of our guys?
And it did, right? And so it wasn't Pulse, but we had countless other post-traumatic stress disorder cases.
Well, the next year after we the statute failed in the first year, we had the Parkland shooting.
Correct. Well, and so I was going to get to that, right? In that year period between 2017 and the 2018 session, we really built a lot of political momentum, and we had other first responders from all over the state, come forward. We had widows, right? We had family members of people who had committed suicide come forward. Stevie Ledoux was a famous case over in Tampa. His family mobilized around this issue and were fierce advocates to get this legislation passed. So by the time we got to 2018, I mean, you literally had a caravan of people that were going up there to testify in front of committee. And I witnessed firsthand, committee members in tears with some of these stories that they could not believe what they were hearing, and that the law didn't protect these folks. And it was like shit through a goose. At that point, we got the committee hearings; they were all unanimous votes. And we had something really interesting happen though near the end, because we were almost through our last committee stop. And I don't know why, but there was a problem, I guess, with the speaker's office, and they didn't want to bring the bill to the last committee. And so we thought we were going to be jammed up, and oh my gosh, our folks were so disappointed and angry. But then in that week, there was a Parkland shooting.
Right.
And that was the tipping point. I mean, when that thing happened, and then it was like, okay, what are we doing for our first responders, right?
Yeah, I mean, a school shooting. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that, right?
Right. And so, that broke the bill loose. And after that last committee stop, it, again, another unanimous vote in favor. It went to the House floor, went to the Senate floor. I think it was nearly unanimous in both houses. And then the governor signed the bill. So, this bill that started out very humbly and with a lot of opposition, by the end, we mentioned the League of Cities previously, they actually, and this is the first time I ever saw this, reverse position on the bill in support of it, right? And if you look at it skeptically, you can understand why, because it was not a good bill, right? It really doesn't accomplish what I think the legislature hoped that it would accomplish.
Right. But we got to look at it through the lens of that time.
Right. And so it was like everybody is on board. We're going to support these guys. The league even falls in line and says, okay, let it go through. Right now, this is a bipartisan love fest. The governor is going to come down to do a bill signing in Tampa. The Ledoux family is there. The Realins are there. All of these folks who had gone to Tallahassee.
Yeah, they applauded them in the House. Remember, we're standing there in the House when they passed it, and then everybody stood up and clapped. And there's Jerry, and there's his wife Jessica, and everybody's applauding him. And we're thinking, holy shit, we got it, right? I mean, this is really happening. It
was amazing. Yeah, I mean, it really was. I mean, just in terms of the politics of it and the visual stuff. But even saying that, Paolo, and I know we're going to get to this in a later podcast, but the legislation is not something that I would have pushed personally, because I just didn't think it would do enough to provide, the lost wage compensation. And that's turned out to be true. But again, you have to go with what the political realities are on the ground.
Right. We have to take what we can get, and we have to make the best of the situation that we're in. So, I mean, at least we can say, or we could say at the time, okay, guys, now we've got some bite, right? Now we've
Right.
got some leverage. Now we've got a legal argument that I can go into court and I can say, if you've been diagnosed and you're not working, your pay is going to be protected. Your job is going to be protected.
Right.
You're going to be able to continue to support your family while you get better and get back to work, right? I mean, that was the theory.
Well,
Now,
sure. Yeah, and I don't mean to minimize, the effort or the outcome, because, there was so much involved in getting that bill passed. And certainly I would never take credit for doing that myself. I mean, it was really a joint effort with a lot of people pulling on oars in the same direction, you know. But at the end of the day, the thing passes. We have the big governors signing down in Tampa. I mean, the entire cabinet showed up. I mean, you had Governor Scott, you had Pam Bondi. I mean, you had everybody. The whole cabinet was there.
right.
It was really a scene. And then the law went into effect. So there we are. We're 2018, July of 2018. Now we've got lost wage protection for post-traumatic stress disorder cases.
Yeah, and then and now, right, and from then to 2025, what the hell have we been doing, right?
Right.
What the hell have we been doing? Okay,
Yeah.
that is another episode. But we can give you a little foreshadowing that it's not as great as it was intended to be. The law looks nice on paper, but the reality is that a lot of those folks on the industry side that said, yeah, go ahead and let the law pass, knew full well that it didn't have very many teeth.
Right.
And it was
Right.
in many ways, the law change made it worse than
Yeah,
making it
it's hard to imagine, right? And I don't think any of us could have foreseen that back when it passed into law. How this was going to be interpreted, what the fights were going to look like in terms of the litigation. Um, but we'll cover all of that and all those problems, at a later time when we go through the white paper that I just did on this.
Right. And that's what we're going to talk about next time, right? Which are essentially the gaps in the current system, right?
Right.
And the reforms that we need to take place. And thank God that I'm partners with you, so I get the benefit of your wisdom and the white paper that you have written on that, which we will talk about next time. And I just want to give a special thanks, send out some more love to Gerry and his family
Oh, yeah.
for allowing us to talk about his
Talk
case,
about the
right?
case.
To
Yeah.
talk about his case and the struggles that him and his family went through. They're just wonderful people, and they have been just fantastic troopers. And who knows, maybe we'll get lucky and we'll have Gerry come do an episode with us, and he can tell us and talk to everybody firsthand about his struggles and about his life, since that case, right? So, if you're listening, if you're a first responder and you're struggling with PTSD, or you've been denied coverage, you're not alone. Okay. You're not powerless. You can learn about your rights under this new statute. You can check out our website, bicklerlaw.com. If you're in a position to advocate for reform, either through your department, your union, or your community, your individual voices matter, right? That's how law changes. That's how these changes happen, right? With a wife or a husband or a son or a daughter who lives through this, one person, can effectuate a change. It really, I mean, we saw it, right? Firsthand. The advocacy of one person getting this law change, right? If you want to take a look at Jeff's white paper, we've got it on our website at bicklerlaw.com. Thank you for your service, and be safe out there. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Paolo.
Thanks for listening to Shielded. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. We've represented thousands of first responders across the state of Florida. If you need assistance, don't wait. Please reach out. To learn more, head over to bicklerlaw.com or email us at info@bicklerlaw.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Bickler Law. And if you found today's episode to be helpful, please share it with a fellow first responder who might need to hear it. Until next time, stay safe and thank you for all you do.